I knew something was wrong the moment I heard the loud knocking on my door. It wasn't normal knocking, it was hard, fast, and meant to scare someone. When I opened the door, my whole driveway was full. HOA Karen stood in the middle, holding her big clipboard like she owned the world. 2 HOA helpers were recording me with their phones. And behind them, 2 police officers stood in silence, looking unsure. Karen didn't greet me. She lifted a stack of papers with red stamps and shouted, "You are breaking HOA rules. You can't leave the HOA, you still belong to us." I took a breath. "I don't live under your HOA anymore," I said. The county confirmed that, but Karen smiled like she already won. "No, I confirmed you're still under us, and today the police will make you pay." One officer stepped closer to hand me a citation. Karen's phone kept recording. Neighbors were watching from their windows. Then I pulled out my wallet and my military ID slid into view. Karen's face turned white. She froze, and that was the moment everything started to change. "Tell me, where are you watching from?" "My name is Daniel Reed, and after 20 years of military service, all I wanted was a quiet life. No noise, no drama, no rules taped to my door every morning. So when I retired, I bought a small piece of land outside the HOA borders. Everyone in town said the same thing. You're safe there, the HOA can't touch that land." And I believed them. Life finally slowed down in the best way. Most days you'd find me in my workshop, sanding a piece of wood until it felt smooth as glass. Or in the garden, planting tomatoes with my wife while our dog slept under the shade. Evenings were simple, slow walks, small town sunsets, quiet dinners. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. This home wasn't just a house to me. It was freedom after a long life of orders, missions, and standing ready. It was the place where I promised myself I would never deal with chaos again. Still, there was always this small rumor in town. People said the HOA's map lines were confusing. Old, messy, drawn decades ago. But every neighbor told me the same thing. "Don't worry, your land isn't theirs, you're outside, you're safe." I believed them. I trusted the county papers. I trusted the peace I worked so hard to build. But looking back now, I should have known that my calm life wouldn't last. I thought moving away from the HOA would finally bring peace. I was wrong. For the first few weeks, life stayed peaceful. I kept to myself, worked in my shop, and barely spoke to anyone except a few friendly neighbors. They all warned me about one person, HOA Karen. People talked about her like she was some kind of storm that passed through the neighborhood and ruined the day. She wasn't elected fairly, she simply acted like she was the queen of the entire area. She carried a clipboard everywhere, even at the grocery store, and she always had that same stiff smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Neighbors said she sent out warning letters for things like mismatched flowers, cars parked 2 inches off, or grass that grew one day too long. She gave surprise inspections, walked into yards without knocking, and wrote fines like she was handing out candy. Everyone feared her. Everyone avoided her. Everyone except me. I wasn't under her rule, or at least that's what I thought. The first real clash happened early on a quiet Monday morning. I was in my backyard sanding a small stool I was building when I heard the sound of fast footsteps on gravel. Before I could turn around, Karen burst into my yard like she owned the place. No hello, no excuse, not even a pause. She stormed right up to me with her clipboard held high. "There you are," she snapped. "We need to talk about your unauthorized move out." I blinked at her. "My what?" She flipped her papers with dramatic force, as if she were holding top-secret files. "According to my records," she said, tapping the page, "you left the HOA without giving notice. That is not allowed. You still belong to us. Parts of this land are still HOA property." I almost laughed. "Ma'am, this land is outside the HOA. The county signed off on it." But she didn't even hear me. She kept talking over my words, like she had practiced this speech in the mirror. "You owe 3 months of back fees," she continued, "plus the compliance fee for leaving without permission, plus a $500 inspection fee, and I'll need keys to all your gates for future checks." I wiped my hands on my apron and tried to stay calm. "Karen," I said in a steady voice, "I don't belong to your HOA. This land has never been part of it." She held up the same old map she showed the cops the day she called them. The paper looked yellowed and torn at the edges. "This map shows you are in our extended boundary," she declared proudly. I shook my head and walked to my workshop. I grabbed the folder the county clerk gave me, the one I kept in case anyone ever questioned me. Inside it was my property deed, signed and stamped with the county seal. I handed it to her. "This is the official document, please read it." She glanced at it for half a second, then rolled her eyes like it was a child's drawing. I don't care what the county says, she said sharply. HOA maps override county records. We have our own rules. I stared at her in shock. This is the law, I said. You can't override it. She ignored me and pulled out her phone. She began taking photos of every corner of my yard, my tools, my workshop door, even the inside of my truck bed, as if she were building a case. You are already in violation, she said while snapping pictures. Expect fines, a lot of. Stop taking pictures of my property, I said firmly. She smirked. It's not your property, not legally. That was the moment my patience snapped, not loudly, but quietly inside. I stepped in front of her camera. You need to leave, I said. Now. Her jaw tightened, her fake smile disappeared. She pointed her pen at me like a weapon. You think this is over? She hissed. I promise you the HOA will take action. You won't like what happens next. Then she spun around and stomped out of my yard, shouting into her phone, probably calling her board members to plan their next move. As she walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A warning. A shift in the air. A quiet message inside me saying, this woman isn't done, and she's going to make this a war. After Karen stormed off my property, I tried to calm myself down, but a tight feeling stayed in my chest. Something told me this wasn't just a random visit. This was the beginning of something bigger. That same afternoon, I drove straight to the county office. If Karen wanted a fight, I wanted the truth on my side. The county clerk, Miss Harper, was an older woman with soft glasses and a calm voice. She typed my property number into her computer, then looked at the screen for a long moment before nodding. You are not under the HOA, she said plainly. Not now, not ever. Your land is fully outside their boundary lines. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Then why is their president claiming otherwise? I asked. Miss Harper sighed in a tired way, like she had heard this story too many times before. That HOA, let's just say they like to use old maps. Very old maps. Maps that don't match our updated records. They've pressured other residents too. They try to scare people into paying or following their rules. So they're basically lying? I asked. Not basically, she said, adjusting her glasses. They are lying, and they know it. She printed out fresh copies of my deed, boundary map, and the official county note showing I was outside HOA limits. If they bother you again, she added, show them these, and if they still push, come straight back. We've had problems with them before. I thanked her and left, but even with the documents in hand, something still felt wrong. Karen didn't look like someone who accepted facts. She looked like someone who needed control. When I got home, my wife was waiting on the porch. She had seen Karen leave earlier and noticed the angry pace in her walk. What happened? She asked, worry filling her eyes. I explained everything, the fake accusations, the old map, the threats. Her face paled. You need to be careful, she whispered. What if she brings the police again? What if they believe her? My wife wasn't scared for herself. She was scared for me, a retired veteran suddenly being painted as a rule breaker, someone dangerous, someone suspicious. And that fear hit me harder than Karen's threats ever could. That night, while we ate dinner, our son kept looking out the window like he expected someone to show up again. Dad, he asked quietly, are we in trouble? My heart twisted. No, buddy, I said. We're not in trouble. Someone is just trying to bother us, but we're doing everything right. But inside, I felt the pressure tightening. Despite doing everything by the book, despite following the law, despite staying respectful, I was being treated like a criminal. And Karen wasn't done. The next morning, something new appeared taped to my front gate, a bright orange fine notice from the HOA. Total amount due. My jaw dropped. They fined me for unauthorized landscaping, unapproved construction, failure to pay membership dues, and even threatening HOA staff. Threatening? I had barely raised my voice. I opened the envelope attached to the notice. Inside was a letter full of bold words, underlines, and legal-sounding threats. Except the grammar was awful, half the sentences didn't make sense, and some words were spelled so badly I had to guess their meaning. It looked like someone copied legal terms from Google and glued them into a letter. I took photos of everything, dated and time-stamped, but the real shock came an hour later. A neighbor messaged me a screenshot of the HOA Facebook group. Karen had posted my name and address publicly with a long message. This resident is dangerous, uncooperative, and refusing to follow HOA rules. Please avoid him and report any suspicious activity. Dangerous. Me. A man who spent 20 years protecting people. The comments below her post were full of fear and confusion. Wow, didn't know he was like this. Karen said he yelled at her. Keep kids away. My stomach twisted as I read. Karen wasn't just fighting me, she was poisoning my name, turning my new community against me before I even had a chance to know them. By the afternoon, I received 3 more letters. They were all from different HOA departments, even though everyone knew Karen basically was every department. One letter said I had 48 hours to repaint my house. Another demanded payment for HOA road maintenance, even though the road wasn't theirs. A third claimed I needed an emergency inspection, which would cost. All 3 letters had the same typos, the same weird phrases, the same bold red threats. It was Karen, every part of it. Later that evening, while I was outside locking my workshop, I saw 2 HOA board members walking slowly past my property line. They weren't there by accident. They were taking photos, recording videos, sending them to Karen. I stepped outside the gate. "Can I help you?" I called out. They didn't answer. They just walked faster. This wasn't random anymore. It was coordinated. A full HOA attack. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Karen emailed me daily violations. Board members watched my house from the street. Someone left an anonymous note calling me HOA enemy. A fake final warning notice was shoved under my workshop door. Every message had the same message behind it. Obey us, pay us, fear us. But the hardest part wasn't the letters. It was watching my wife check the windows at night. Watching my son sleep with his door cracked open. Watching neighbors whisper and point every time I stepped outside. I felt cornered in my own home. A home I bought for peace. A home I earned. But the more they pushed, the more I realized something important. I wasn't the one who needed to be afraid. They were, because sooner or later, this was going to backfire on them. And Karen had no idea how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. The next week felt like living in a pressure cooker. Every day brought something new, something louder, something crazier, something that made me ask myself how far Karen was willing to go. It started early one morning when I stepped outside to drink my coffee on the porch. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the road, then stopped right in front of my property. The officer inside glanced at me, checked something on his tablet, then drove away without a word. 10 minutes later, another car, an HOA board member, parked halfway on the curb and began taking photos of my yard like she was documenting a crime scene. She zoomed in on my garden hose, on my truck tires, even on my mailbox. I walked down the driveway. "Can I help you?" She didn't even look up. "HOA inspection," she muttered. "You'll hear from us soon." By noon, I understood why all the cars had appeared. A police officer knocked on my door. Not one I recognized. Younger, nervous, gripping his notepad a little too tight. "Sir," he said, clearing his throat, "we received a complaint from the HOA stating you've been trespassing on HOA-maintained land." I stared at him. "Trespassing? On my own property?" He checked his notes. "They say part of this area is under HOA control." I handed him the county-stamped documents. "These maps are fake," I said. "Karen is using outdated plats." He looked at the papers, then back at me. "I believe you," he said quietly, "but we still have to file the report." When he left, something inside me hardened. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was an attack. Later that day, things escalated even more. I was fixing a board on my workshop door when I noticed 2 HOA men standing at the side of the house. They were holding measuring tapes, clipboards, and one of them had a camera strapped around his neck like a paparazzi photographer. They didn't see me at first. They were too busy peering into my windows. "Hey," I barked, walking toward them. "Get off my property." They jumped, startled. One dropped his clipboard. We have authority to be here," the taller one said. "Karen sent us." "No, you don't," I said firmly. "You're trespassing." They backed away but kept recording until they reached the street. By evening, the real blow landed. A thick envelope was shoved under my door. The return address, HOA Legal Department. I opened it and found a long cease and desist letter filled with big legal terms that made no sense in the order they were written. The letter claimed I was refusing mandatory HOA inspection. I owed unpaid dues. My behavior posed a threat to HOA staff, and if I didn't comply, they would pursue maximum legal remedy. At the bottom was a signature from an HOA attorney, except the signature looked suspiciously like Karen's handwriting. I took the letter, placed it with my growing stack of evidence, and hit record on my phone. Something told me this was far from the worst of it. I was right. Just after sunset, there was another knock at the door. Hard, bossy, familiar. I opened it slowly. Karen stood there, red-faced, eyes wide, clipboard clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. "I am here for a full inspection," she said loudly, as if performing for invisible cameras. "Right now." "No," I replied. "You are not entering my home." "That is an HOA violation," she snapped. You're not my HOA. She stepped closer, nose almost touching mine. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I hit record on my phone, holding it up clearly. Say that again, I said. Karen froze. Her eyes darted to the camera light on my phone. She turned stiff, forced a smile, then backed away with sudden sweetness. This will be noted, she said coldly. Expect consequences. And then she walked off into the night. Inside, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Karen's voice came through, low and angry. You think you're smart? You think your little papers can stop us? You're about to learn how things work around here. I replayed the message 3 times. That was the moment I realized something important. Karen wasn't just pushing boundaries, she was breaking the law. And now I had proof. The next morning I woke up to find 3 HOA board members standing across the street, whispering among themselves while pointing at my house. One of them held a binder thick enough to choke a horse, another held a zoom camera, filming every move I made the moment I stepped outside. It wasn't even subtle anymore. It was a mess. By noon I received an email from the HOA board. Emergency vote held today, case escalated to law enforcement due to residents' hostile and aggressive behavior. Hostile? Aggressive? I hadn't even raised my voice. They were building a fake story from scratch. I knew I had to protect myself. So I grabbed my phone, opened a new folder, and labeled it HOA harassment, evidence. I filmed everything. Every car that slowed down, every board member walking by, every letter taped to my gate, every voicemail, including Karen's threatening one. I saved screenshots of her Facebook post, calling me dangerous. I recorded timestamps of every drive-by. I even set up a small camera near my workshop window facing the street. If they wanted a war, I was building my shield. But the biggest moment came that afternoon when I drove to a law office recommended by the county clerk. Inside, a calm, sharp-eyed lawyer named Mr. Jensen listened as I told him everything. Karen, the fake maps, the police, the threats, the illegal inspections, the harassment. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he asked to see the documents. I handed him my county deed, the HOA's fake plat map, the cease and desist letter, and the printed screenshots. He studied the HOA map for less than 5 seconds before shaking his head. This map is outdated by at least 20 years, he said. And look at this. He pointed to 2 signatures at the bottom. Both signatures are identical, same slant, same ink. They weren't signed by 2 people, they were copied. My stomach twisted. So it's forged? He nodded. Completely forged. And illegal. He picked up the cease and desist next. This isn't written by a lawyer, he said. Half of the terms aren't even real. I let out a breath. So I'm not crazy. No, he said. You're being bullied, and very badly. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. And if they keep pushing, this could become a criminal matter, but not against you. That sentence alone gave me strength. I spent the next 2 hours gathering documents with him, labeling evidence, and creating a file that was slowly turning into a mountain of proof against the HOA. When I left his office, I felt a small spark of hope. But that hope didn't last long. When I pulled into my driveway, a police cruiser was already waiting. 2 officers stepped out, different from the ones before. Taller, more serious, hands resting on their belts like they were expecting trouble. Sir, one officer said, we received a report from the HOA that you threatened their president. I stared at them. I have everything recorded, I said calmly. Would you like to see proof that nothing like that ever happened? They looked at each other. Clearly, this wasn't what they expected. The first one cleared his throat. Ma'am, Karen told us you're ex-military and possibly unstable. There it was. The lie Karen had been building. The fear she wanted the police to feel. The picture she wanted them to believe. The angry veteran who couldn't be trusted. But when I pulled out my phone and showed them the videos, Karen barging onto my land, Karen yelling, Karen refusing to read county documents, Karen taking photos, they both softened. Sir, the older officer said quietly, I'm sorry, we had to check, but you're clearly not the problem here. Karen had tried to weaponize the police against me. Again, the officers left, promising to file a neutral report, but I knew it wouldn't stop her. Later that night, as the sun dropped and the crickets started singing, my phone buzzed again. A new voicemail from an HOA board member this time. His voice was cold and smug. You should have just listened to Karen. We're done being nice. This is gonna get serious. I listened to it twice, 3 times, then saved it. Because now it was official. The HOA wasn't just pushing back, they were going all in. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about maps. This wasn't even about land. This was about power. And Karen was terrified of losing hers. But the thing she didn't realize, the thing she couldn't understand, I had finally reached the point where I wasn't scared anymore. And once I stopped being scared, everything started to change. The next morning, I drove back to the county office with a different kind of determination in my chest. This time, I wasn't just looking for confirmation. I was looking for proof strong enough to shut down Karen, the HOA board, and every lie they had built around me. My lawyer, Miss Jensen, told me exactly what I needed. Original records, old maps, anything that showed how the land really looked before the HOA started twisting it. The county building was quiet when I walked in. A few people were lined up at the front desk, but most of the chairs were empty. I asked to see the archived land surveys, and the clerk raised her eyebrows when she saw my request. "Going back that far?" she asked. I nodded. She sighed, walked to the back and returned with a metal key. Then she pointed toward a room in the corner. "Archives are down that hallway. Last room." The archive room smelled like dust and old paper. Yellow folders filled tall metal cabinets, each labeled with numbers and years. I ran my fingers across the drawers until I found the one I needed. 1994, County Boundary Surveys. I pulled it open and it groaned like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside were dozens of rolled-up maps. Some were cracked around the edges, some still bright and sharp. I sat at the long table in the center of the room, unrolling one map after another. It took nearly an hour before I found it. The map showing my land, the land next to mine, and the original HOA line drawn in bold black ink. The moment I saw it, my breath caught in my chest. My property was clearly outside the HOA boundary, not close, not borderline, not confusing. It was far outside, so far that the HOA would have needed to cross several unrelated parcels just to reach my land. For a second, I just stared at it. This was the truth. This was the thing Karen had been pretending didn't exist. I took several photos, then I made copies on the old machine in the corner. My hands shook a little, not from fear but from the feeling of finally gaining ground. When I drove straight to my lawyer's office and laid the survey on his desk, he didn't say anything for a long moment. He simply studied it, then opened a drawer, pulled out the HOA's fake map and placed them side by side. The difference was shocking. My map was clean, stamped, easy to read. Karen's map looked messy, stretched, and had strange scribbles on the side, as if someone had tried to redraw the boundary lines by hand. My lawyer leaned back in his chair. "This," he said, tapping Karen's map, "is what we call shadow annexation. They took the original map and extended the boundary without any legal procedure. It's illegal, completely illegal." "Why would she do that?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he clicked around on his computer until he pulled up the HOA's financial records, which were public due to previous complaints. He pointed at a long list of maintenance fees, special projects, and unusual expenses. "These charges make no sense," he said. "This HOA collects far more money than it needs. And look, there are repeated withdrawals listed under President's discretionary spending. That's Karen. So she extended the boundaries just to get more dues?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "And probably to fund whatever she wanted." Hearing that made everything fall into place. Karen's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. Not because of rules, not because of control, but because of money. She wasn't just power hungry, she was greedy. Before I could even process that, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I felt a rush of surprise. It was from one of the HOA board members. A short message, nervous, hesitant, almost scared. Karen made us sign documents we didn't understand. She said it was routine. I think she forged parts of them. Please don't tell her I told you. I stared at the message, reading it over and over again. Another crack in Karen's armor, another sign that the board wasn't loyal to her. They were afraid of her. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since the beginning. Strength. I went home and began to organize everything. Copies of the 1994 map, county letters, the forged notices Karen sent, screenshots of her Facebook post, videos of her trespassing, recordings of her threats, the voicemail she left, every piece of evidence that showed she had been building her power on lies. My dining table disappeared under stacks of paper, files, reports, and labeled envelopes. I worked until past midnight, sorting it all into one giant case. When I finally stepped back and looked at everything, a calm washed over me. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was ready. And the community meeting, the one where Karen expected to humiliate me, was coming soon. Except now, she wouldn't be the one in control. For the first time in this entire fight, I held the truth. For the next 2 days, my house turned into something between a war room and a detective office. Papers covered every surface, from the kitchen counter to the coffee table. My laptop buzzed with county emails, legal responses, and digital copies of old maps. Every piece of evidence told the same story. Karen had been lying for years, stretching the HOA borders like a rubber band, grabbing properties that never belonged to her, and using the money however she wanted. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Karen wasn't confused. She wasn't mistaken. She wasn't misreading old maps. She was doing it on purpose. On the third morning, I woke up early and drove back to my lawyer's office with everything sorted into folders. He sat across from me, flipping through each page slowly. Every now and then, he gave a quiet, knowing nod. When he reached the forged signatures, he held them up toward the light, examining the ink, the angles, the repeated strokes. "There is no question," he said. "These signatures are copies. Whoever did this wasn't even careful." I leaned forward. "How serious is this?" "Serious enough for a criminal investigation," he replied. "This isn't a simple HOA mistake. This is fraud." Hearing that word fraud made my chest tighten. This wasn't just a neighborhood conflict anymore. This wasn't some angry HOA president with a clipboard and an ego problem. This was something huge, something dangerous. And Karen had been bold enough to drag me into the middle of it. My lawyer helped me prepare a full binder, professional, organized and heavy enough to feel like a weapon. Inside it, we added everything: the original 1994 boundary map, updated county files, the forged HOA papers, screenshots of Karen's Facebook post, timestamps of her trespassing, photos of the fake fine letters, and the threatening voicemail she left. By the time we were done, it felt like I was holding the entire truth of the neighborhood in my hands. When I got home, something new happened, something I wasn't expecting at all. Another message popped up on my phone. It wasn't angry, it wasn't threatening, it wasn't from Karen, it was from a different board member. Someone I barely recognized. Their message sounded shaky, almost guilty. "I'm sorry about how things have gone. Karen forced us to sign things we never agreed with. She said it was part of a regular update, but after seeing what she posted about you online, I don't trust her anymore." I stared at the message for a long time. This wasn't just someone wanting to help. This was someone scared of Karen, scared of what she had done, scared of being caught in the middle. For the first time, I realized something important. Karen was losing control. Her own board was cracking. Her lies were catching up to her. Her power was nothing but a house built on sand, and I had just kicked the foundation. That night, while the house was quiet and the lights were low, I spread everything out on the dining table again. I walked around it slowly, looking at every piece of evidence. The old survey, the new maps, the forged notices, the videos of her demanding to inspect my property, the voicemail where she tried to intimidate me. Piece by piece, I could see the truth forming like a clear picture. She wasn't attacking me because I was a threat. She was attacking me because I was outside her control. And for someone like Karen, that was the real crime. As I packed everything neatly into the binder, a strange calm settled over me. Not the peaceful kind I used to feel when working in my shop. Not the quiet happiness of gardening or watching a sunset. This calm felt sharper, stronger. Like the steady breath you take before stepping into something important. Because the community meeting, the one Karen thought she would use to corner me, was only days away. She was preparing to embarrass me, to shame me, to turn the whole neighborhood against me. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know what I had gathered. She didn't know what her own board had admitted. And she definitely didn't know I was walking into that meeting, not as the man she tried to bully, but as the man ready to expose every one of her lies. Nothing about this fight felt scary anymore. Not the HOA, not the fines, not the threats, not even Karen. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt ready. Ready to stand my ground. Ready to protect my home. Ready to show everyone who the real villain was. And when that meeting came, I wouldn't be the one shaking. Karen would. The night of the community meeting arrived faster than I expected. The HOA held their meetings inside an old community hall near the entrance of the neighborhood. The building looked harmless from the outside, but tonight it felt like walking into a courtroom. Cars filled every parking spot. People stood in groups outside, whispering and looking toward the doors as if something big was about to happen. Some glanced at me when I stepped out of my truck, their eyes unsure, half afraid of me, half afraid of what the meeting would reveal. Inside, the room was packed. Folding chairs covered the floor from wall to wall. The HOA board sat at a long table in the front, and in the very center, sitting as straight as a ruler, was Karen. She wore a blazer the color of dried mustard, her hair pulled back tight, clipboard placed neatly in front of her like a judge ready to pass a sentence. The moment she saw me, she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who thought she already won. People whispered as I walked to the back. Some pointed, some stared, some moved a little further away. Karen had done a good job poisoning the air. The meeting began with the usual greetings, but nobody cared about the routine. Everyone knew why they were here. Everyone knew something explosive was coming. Karen tapped her microphone. "Before we begin tonight's regular agenda," she said, her voice sweet and sharp at the same time, "we must address a serious problem in our community." She lifted a folder thick with papers. "We have a resident who has committed repeated violations, ignored HOA authority, refused inspections, attacked our staff, and trespassed on federal-level property." A wave of gasps rolled through the room. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my face calm. This was her plan. Shock the room first, then paint the villain, then take the victory. She stood up, staring directly at me. "Daniel Reed," she said loudly, "you have violated multiple HOA regulations and attempted to remove yourself from our association without permission. Furthermore, you have been seen trespassing on HOA-maintained land which is under federal mapping jurisdiction." Someone whispered, "Federal? Seriously?" Another muttered, "Is that even a thing?" But Karen didn't stop. Her voice grew louder, faster, desperate to keep control. "This resident is a threat to our community. He has refused peaceful communication, disrespected HOA officials, and used intimidation tactics. We will be discussing disciplinary action and potential legal steps." The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. This was my moment. The moment I had prepared for. The moment Karen thought would ruin me, but instead, it would destroy her lies. I stood up slowly. Chairs creaked. A few people whispered. Karen raised her chin, waiting for me to lose my temper, but I didn't. I walked to the front calmly, holding my binder by my side. "May I speak?" I asked. Karen tried to interrupt, but one of the board members cleared his throat. "He has the right to respond." Karen's eyes narrowed. I stepped up to the center of the room, took a breath, and opened my binder. "Everything Karen just said," I began, "is false." A ripple went through the crowd. I held up the first document. "This is the official county boundary survey from 1994. It clearly shows that my property is not and never has been under the HOA." A few people leaned forward. Karen's face twitched. "This," I continued, lifting the next page, "is the updated county document from last year, confirming the same thing." I walked toward the front table and set the papers down where everyone could see. Karen's eyes darted to them, then away, as if touching them would burn her. People in the crowd started murmuring. "Wait, he's outside the HOA? Then why did she tell us otherwise? That looks official." I reached into my binder again. "Here are the violation notices Karen sent me. Every single one is filled with spelling errors, fake legal terms, and forged signatures. My lawyer confirmed all of it." More gasps. More whispers. Karen's foot tapped under the table. "And here," I said, lifting the old map Karen had used, "is the outdated plat she's been relying on. When you compare it to the real one, you can see someone extended the HOA boundary by hand. That's illegal. It's called shadow annexation." The board members stared at the map like it was a ticking bomb. One of them shifted his chair away from Karen. I looked at the crowd. Karen has been expanding the HOA borders for years. Not because of rules, not because of community needs, but because she wanted more dues and more control. A loud murmur rose. People turned to Karen with sharp eyes. A man in the second row stood up. "Karen fined me $200 because my disabled license plate wasn't aesthetically pleasing. She said it was her right." Another voice joined. "She charged me for a fence that was already approved." Someone else added, "She threatened to tow my daughter's car when she came home from college." Voices layered one after another like a rising wave. And for the first time ever, Karen looked small. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "That's not true," she stammered. "You're all taking things out of context." But the room didn't believe her. Not anymore. I took one final step forward and played the voicemail she left me, her voice full of anger. "You think you're smart? You think your little papers can stop us? You're about to learn how things work around here." When the last word echoed through the hall, the room erupted. Not with shouting, but with stunned silence. Karen shook her head, eyes wide, hands trembling. This is taken the wrong way. But nobody believed her. One board member stood up and moved his chair away. Another turned his nameplate face down. A third folded his arms and refused to look at her. Her grip on the room, the power she used like a weapon, was slipping from her fingers, and she knew it. Her breathing grew fast. Her eyes darted from person to person. Her clipboard shook in her hands. This was the first time she wasn't in charge. The first time the room wasn't afraid of her. The first time the truth broke through her lie. And Karen, the queen of the HOA, was finally starting to panic. The room was still buzzing with shock when the board members asked everyone to sit down. Even Karen, who normally commanded the space like she owned it, looked shaken. Her hands trembled as she tried to hold her clipboard steady. Her eyes darted from person to person, searching for support, but no one met her gaze. Just when the tension felt like it might snap in half, the back doors of the hall opened. A man in a gray jacket walked in. He wasn't a resident, he wasn't a board member, he wasn't someone anyone recognized. But the moment he stepped forward and pulled out a badge, the entire room fell silent. "Evening," he said calmly. "I'm Investigator Collins with the county." Karen's eyes widened. What are you doing here?" she stammered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the front of the room, stopped right beside me, and turned to face the crowd. "For the last several weeks," he said, "our office has been reviewing multiple complaints filed about this HOA." The entire room froze. Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The investigator pulled out a folder thicker than any document Karen brought. He opened it slowly, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "In particular," he continued, "we've received repeated reports about false fines, illegal annexation of land, forged documents, and misuse of HOA funds." Gasps broke through the room. I saw 2 board members lower their heads. Karen looked like she couldn't breathe. The investigator nodded toward me. "Mr. Reed, thank you for providing your documentation." Karen snapped back to life. You listened to him? He's lying. He hates the HOA." The investigator raised a hand. "Ma'am, please sit down." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. My lawyer stepped beside me, buttoned his jacket, and moved toward the front of the table. "If it pleases the room," he said, "I'd like to present the evidence my client and I have gathered." The investigator nodded. My lawyer placed the original 1994 boundary survey on the table. The bold black line separating my property from the HOA territory was crystal clear. He placed Karen's altered map next to it. The difference was like day and night. "This is the official county line," he said, "and this," he pointed to Karen's map, "is a doctored version created without any legal approval." People in the crowd leaned forward. One woman whispered, "Oh my God." A man shook his head slowly. My lawyer continued. "For years, Karen has been telling residents that the HOA boundaries changed. They never did. She created false maps and pressured board members to sign documents they didn't understand. Some signatures appear to be copied or traced." One board member suddenly stood up. His face was red, his jaw tight. "I need to say something," he blurted out. "Karen told us the original maps were lost. She said the HOA had the right to redraw the boundaries. She made us sign new versions, but she never let us read the whole thing." Karen's head jerked toward him. "That's not true. You're twisting." He shook his head. "No, I'm done covering for you." Murmurs filled the room. Karen's hands curled into fists. My lawyer moved on, placing printed screenshots on the table. "These are text messages where Karen instructs her board to stretch the boundaries so more residents can be charged dues." A wave of outrage rolled through the hall. People gasped, groaned, whispered angrily. Karen shot up from her chair. "Those aren't real, they're taken out of context." But the investigator lifted a hand again. "Sit down, ma'am." This time she didn't sit. She dropped, shoulders slumped, breathing uneven, her mask finally cracking. And then came the moment I didn't expect. The investigator turned to Karen. "Ma'am," he said in a calm but steady voice, "why did you lie about Mr. Reed's identity when you contacted law enforcement?" The room went completely still. Karen blinked. What do you mean?" "You reported him as a potentially violent ex-military risk. You told police he was unstable. You told them he threatened you." I never said unstable," she stuttered. "I just told them he was. He raised an eyebrow. "A danger?" She swallowed hard. The investigator turned toward me. "Mr. Reed, may I see the ID you presented to the officers?" I pulled out my military ID and handed it to him. He held it up so the crowd could see. The room reacted with a mixture of respect, guilt, and anger. The investigator faced Karen again. "Why?" he asked. "Did you tell the police he refused to identify himself and acted aggressively when the recording clearly shows he was calm?" Karen's voice cracked. He was trying to intimidate me." "How?" the investigator asked. "By showing lawful identification." Her mouth opened, but no words came. There it was. The truth exposed. The lies pulled out into the light. Even the officers standing at the back of the room exchanged looks ashamed, knowing they had been manipulated. The investigator closed his folder. "At this point," he said, "we have enough to move forward." Karen's face turned white. This HOA president, he continued, is being removed from her position effective immediately while the county conducts a full investigation. People in the room gasped again, but this time it sounded like relief. A weight lifting. Karen stumbled back a step. No, you can't do this. I'm the president. Not anymore, the investigator replied. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the table for support. The board members looked away. Neighbors glared at her. Someone whispered, "It's about time." For the first time since the nightmare began, the power shifted back where it belonged, and Karen knew it. Karen stood frozen at the front of the room, gripping the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her eyes darted from the investigator to the audience, searching for a single friendly face, a single supporter, someone who would step forward and defend her. But no one did. The same neighbors she bullied for years now stared at her with disappointment, anger, and disbelief. The investigator wasn't done. "There's more," he said, flipping through the folder in his hands. "Our office confirmed that the HOA has issued thousands of dollars in illegal fines over the last 3 years. Most of those fines were approved only by the president, without board votes." Karen's breathing grew loud and shaky. That's not illegal," she whispered. "I was doing my job." His expression didn't change. "Your job does not include forging maps, altering county boundaries, or threatening law enforcement with false reports." A few people in the crowd clapped, not loud. Just a few brave, sharp claps that echoed in the tense silence, but it was enough to make Karen's head snap toward them, her eyes wide with panic. My lawyer stepped forward once more. "For the record," he said, "my client has complied with every law, every request, every attempt at peaceful communication. Meanwhile, Karen has repeatedly trespassed on his property, harassed his family, misused HOA authority, and attempted to weaponize the police against him." The investigator nodded. "We've confirmed that too." Karen shook her head violently. No, this is wrong. This is all twisted. I was trying to protect the community." One of the board members stood up. "Protect us? You scared us? You threatened us? You told us we'd be fined or removed if we didn't sign what you wanted?" Another board member followed. "You destroyed the original maps. You said the county lost them. You lied." A woman in the front row added quietly, "You fined me because my daughter's wheelchair ramp didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. I cried for a week." More voices rose behind her. "You threatened to tow my car at 3 a.m. You fined me for having a garden hose visible. You said my husband's medical equipment made our house look messy. You called my child's service dog a violation." The room was no longer whispering. It was confessing. Karen's face twisted into something between anger and terror. "You're all against me," she hissed. "You're letting him turn you against me." But the truth was visible now, bright as daylight. No one needed me to say anything. Karen had destroyed herself. The investigator lifted a final document, the one that would seal everything. "This is a formal notice," he said, "that the county is opening an investigation into financial fraud, document forgery, boundary manipulation, and harassment. The HOA is fined immediately, and further charges may follow." Karen staggered backward like the words had hit her bodily. "No, please, you don't understand. She didn't finish the sentence. Her voice cracked and she sank into her chair. 2 county officers entered quietly through the back door. They weren't there to arrest her, not yet, but they were there to escort her out, to prevent her from causing a scene. One officer gently touched her shoulder. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Karen shook her head. I'm the president. Her voice faded into a broken whisper. They led her out of the hall as the crowd watched. Some neighbors looked angry, some looked relieved, some simply looked tired, as if they had been waiting years for this moment. When the doors closed behind her, the room felt lighter. Not cheerful, not happy, just lighter, like a storm had finally passed. The investigator turned back to me. "Mr. Reed," he said, "you are fully cleared of all accusations. The HOA has no authority over your land. The police reports submitted against you were false and will be corrected. On behalf of the county, I apologize for the trouble this has caused." For a moment, I didn't speak. I just nodded, feeling the tension in my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. My lawyer shook my hand. "You handled this with more patience than most people ever could." I exhaled slowly. "I just wanted peace." One of the police officers stepped forward. "We're sorry, sir. We were given misleading information. That won't happen again." I appreciated the apology more than I expected. It wasn't just words, it was closure. Around me, the neighbors began to gather. A few came forward with gentle smiles. "I'm sorry we believed her. We didn't know the truth. She scared us, too." A man I had never spoken to shook my hand. "Thank you for standing up to her. You helped all of us." The board members approached next, cautious and humbled. "We'll be correcting the boundaries," one said. "For good this time. Your land is your land." The meeting slowly dissolved into soft conversations, apologies, and relief. People walked out into the night with easier shoulders, talking about repairing fences, repainting mailboxes, and rebuilding trust. I stood there quietly, watching the room empty, feeling something finally loosen inside me. This wasn't just a win. This was justice. And for the first time since Karen knocked on my door, I felt like my home finally belonged to me again. The weeks after the community meeting felt strangely calm, almost too calm, like the whole neighborhood was taking a long, deep breath for the first time in years. News travels fast in small communities, and word about Karen's downfall spread even faster. One day she was the loudest voice in the neighborhood, marching around with her clipboard like a general. The next day she was gone. No more early morning patrols, no more bright orange violation notices taped to doors, no more threats, no more yelling, no more surprise inspection. It was as if she vanished from the world. Some people said she moved away in the middle of the night. Others said she was staying at a relative's house until the county investigation finished. A few whispered that she simply couldn't show her face here anymore. Whatever the truth was, her absence felt like stepping out of a dark room into sunlight. With Karen gone, the HOA board changed almost overnight. The remaining board members were quiet, shaken, and strangely polite. A temporary acting president named Mr. Lopez came to my door one afternoon. He didn't come with a clipboard or a letter. He came with his hat in his hands, shoulders lowered. "I'm here to apologize," he said softly, "for everything. We let her run things however she wanted, and we didn't stop her. We should have. We're fixing it now." I studied his face. He wasn't lying. He wasn't covering for anyone. He looked tired in the way someone looks when they've been carrying guilt for too long. "I appreciate that," I said. "Just make sure this never happens again, to anyone." He nodded, almost relieved, like he expected me to slam the door instead of listening. After that, the neighborhood changed in ways I didn't expect. People who had once avoided me now waved from their yards. A few came over with small gifts, fresh bread, homemade cookies, jars of honey. One older couple brought a basket of vegetables from their garden. "We're glad you stood up," they said. "Karen had us all scared." It felt strange, being seen as the voice of reason in a place where I barely knew anyone. But it also felt good in a quiet, steady way, like things were finally shifting back to normal. One evening, about a week after the meeting, I was sitting on the porch with my wife. The sun was dropping behind the trees, turning the sky a soft orange. Our dogs slept at our feet, and everything felt calm again, so calm that I could almost forget the chaos we had been in. My wife looked over at me. "You did the right thing," she said. "You stood up not just for us, but for everyone." I stared out at the yard, listening to the crickets starting to chirp. "I didn't want to fight," I said quietly. "But some fights come to your door, whether you want them or not." She nodded. "And you handled it with dignity." Her words sank into me slowly. All my life, in the military and outside of it, I tried to live with discipline, honesty, and respect. And standing up to Karen wasn't about winning. It was about protecting what I earned, what I built, what mattered. After the sun fully set, we went inside. The house felt warm again, not the heavy warmth of stress, but the soft, peaceful kind that a home should have. Our son was drawing in the living room, humming to himself like he had finally let go of the worry he carried weeks before. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Not just physically safe, emotionally safe. Safe in a way that can only be earned through truth. But the most surprising change came from the community itself. Without Karen's grip, the neighbors began coming together. A small group formed a bylaw reform committee. They met every weekend to rewrite the HOA rules, make them clearer, fairer, and kinder. They knocked on my door one day to ask if I wanted to attend. "Your experience opened our eyes," they told me. "We want to make sure this never happens again. Your voice matters." I didn't need praise or attention, but hearing that, it meant something. It meant the community wasn't just fixing the problem, they were growing from it. At night, when the world got quiet and the air settled, I'd sometimes step outside and look at the property I fought so hard to protect. The fence lines, the little garden, the workshop where I built things with my hands. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. It felt peaceful again, stronger, protected. And for the first time since Karen knocked on my door, I felt like my life was truly mine again. Over the next few weeks, something beautiful started happening, something I hadn't seen since moving here. The neighborhood slowly began to heal. For the first time, people weren't walking on eggshells or watching their windows for HOA patrols. Children rode their bikes freely. Couples walked their dogs without fear of being fined, and front yards suddenly bloomed with flowers. Karen would have called non-approved vegetation. It felt like the community was breathing again. One Saturday morning, as I was trimming a piece of wood in my workshop, I heard a light knock. Not the angry, demanding knock I had grown used to, but a soft one. When I opened the door, a small group of neighbors stood there, holding a folder. "We wanted to give you this," one of them said. Inside the folder were the first drafts of the new HOA bylaws. Clean, simple, and fair. No hidden rules. No confusing language. No unfair punishments. They were removing Karen's entire system and building something better. "We'd like you to look them over," another neighbor said. "We know you're not in the HOA, but you helped us see what was wrong. Your opinion matters." I didn't expect that. I didn't expect any of it. I was just trying to protect my home, my family, and my peace. But somehow, that fight had sparked something larger inside the community, a desire to rebuild trust and start fresh. After they left, I sat at the table and flipped through the pages. There were simple rules, clear explanations, and even a section about protecting residents from harassment. For the first time, the HOA looked like it was actually meant to help people instead of control them. My wife came in with 2 cups of tea. She sat across from me, watching my face as I read. "You did this," she said gently. "They feel safe now because you stood your ground." I shook my head. I just exposed the truth. They're the ones choosing to fix things. She smiled. Sometimes it only takes one person to push back for others to find their courage. Her words stayed with me long after she went back outside. Later that afternoon, I took a slow walk around my land. The trees swayed lightly in the breeze. The garden was quiet except for a few birds hopping in the dirt. The workshop door creaked the same way it always had. Everything looked simple, but everything felt earned. Peace hits differently when you've had to fight for it. That night, my son asked if we could sit outside and watch the stars. We brought blankets and sat on the porch steps while the sky darkened and the world grew quiet. "Dad," he said, leaning against my arm, "are we safe now?" I put an arm around him. "Yeah, buddy, we're safe." For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he whispered, "I didn't like when people were scared of us." I closed my eyes for a second. It wasn't easy to hear that. The whole time I had been focused on Karen, the HOA, and the fight. I forgot how much weight my son had been carrying. "Well," I said, "people know the truth now, and the ones who mattered never doubted us." He nodded quietly, settling in closer. After he went to bed, I stayed outside a little longer. The night was warm, the sky clear, and the air carried a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. The world wasn't perfect, but it was honest again. And sometimes honesty is the biggest victory of all. Before going inside, I took one last look around. My land, my home, my peace. None of it had come easy, but it was mine, truly mine. The next morning, neighbors waved at me as I stepped outside, real smiles, not forced, not fearful. A couple stopped me on the sidewalk just to talk, something that never happened before. "We're glad you're here," they said. "You helped fix things." I thanked them quietly. I didn't need recognition. I didn't need praise. But hearing those words reminded me of something I often forgot. Sometimes standing up isn't just for yourself. Sometimes it's for everyone who couldn't stand up before. And as the sun rose higher over the houses, lighting up the neighborhood with a soft glow, I felt something settle inside me, something steady, something whole. Justice had been served. Peace had returned. And for the first time since moving here, the community finally felt like home. When everything finally settled and life returned to normal, I found myself standing at the edge of my yard. One quiet evening, the sun was low, painting the sky in soft orange and gold. My land was calm again. No HOA cars creeping by, no clipboard warriors hiding behind bushes, no fake violations taped to my gate. Just peace. And as I stood there, I realized something important, something I wished I had understood from the beginning. Peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It doesn't come from staying quiet. It doesn't come from hoping a bully will simply stop on their own. Peace comes from protecting what's yours when someone crosses the line. I didn't want to fight. I never wanted drama, noise, or attention. I just wanted a home, a place where my family could breathe, where my hands could build something real, where every sunset felt earned. But sometimes life puts a storm at your door. And sometimes you have to step forward, stand tall, and say, "This is my line. You don't get to cross it." This whole experience taught me something about boundaries. Not just property boundaries, but personal ones too. When someone tries to control you, scare you, or rewrite your life for their own power, the only way to win is by standing firm in the truth. The county maps, the lawyer's words, the meeting, the investigation, those things cleared my name. But the real victory came from not letting Karen break me. Not letting her rewrite who I was. Not letting her fear tactics replace my dignity. And if there is one thing I want anyone listening to this story to remember, it's this. You are allowed to defend your peace. You are allowed to stand your ground. And you are allowed to protect your home, your family, and your rights, no matter who tries to take them. Before I close this chapter, I want to ask you something. Have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare? Has someone ever crossed your boundaries? Has a neighbor, a board, or a person in power tried to control your life the way Karen tried to control mine? Share your story in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, your state, your city, your country. And tell me which part of this story shocked you the most. Your story might help someone else who's facing the same thing. Your voice might give someone the strength to stand up, just like I had to. And if you want more real cinematic HOA justice stories, make sure you subscribe. There are many more battles, many more victories, and many more truths waiting to be told. Because at the end of the day, home should always feel like home. And nobody, HOA or not, has the right to take that away.